Hi, everybody. Joe Moore here, Psychedelics Today. Today on this show, we have the Cosmic Engagement Officer of Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps, David Bronner here. How you doing today, David?
Pretty great. Sharing today's National Coming Out Day. I'm coming out as he, they with my pronouns. Just want to, just really acknowledge my inner genderqueer nature, as well as just throw my little tiny contribution to making this world a more compassionate, safer place for all our beautiful LGBTQIA brothers and sisters and siblings. So, yeah.
And a lot of people wonder why we take the time to say this kind of stuff, but there's so much active violence happening that we have to. It's just not okay, and we need to stand up and help get people, safe again, to the best of our ability. Yeah. So it's part of the fight. All right. So, David, today we want to talk a lot about this Colorado initiative. And you and I got to finally meet in person at an event last Thursday, a Chacruna event, with two wonderful panels. I thought you did a great job. The event was really great. A lot of engagement, a lot of heat.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is a really big issue. And I was wondering, like, from your perspective, could you give us just a 10,000 foot view of what is this bill or proposition that we're voting on as Coloradans in November?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the most progressive policy that the country's seen yet, and brings together two powerful healing modalities. One, community healing in a decriminalized context, so churches, community healing circles. So, basically no regulation, and allowing organizations to form and grow their medicine and take their medicine and provide that mutual support and camaraderie. That's just so key, I think, for long-term health for all of us. And then a regulated access program. So setting in motion. So first, medicines are decriminalized. So all psilocybin mushrooms and non peyote cacti containing mescaline, DMT, so ayahuasca, and 5-MeO, and then ibogaine and iboga. And so the community healing decriminalization takes effect immediately. And then the regulated program, it takes 2 years to implement. And the first thing that happens is an advisory board with, I think, 20 members is set up. And it's basically experts and people with relevant experience from different sectors coming together. And there's a very progressive language, mandatory BIPOC representation, and gives the advisory board the power to basically recommend an additional medicine after psilocybin. So psilocybin happens first, and then 2 years later, there's an option to add a particular other medicine or not. And I think a lot of us are kind of eyeing ibogaine, like that's the one we really see as makes a lot of sense in a regulated program. And just to kind of like outline the virtues of the regulated program, most Americans are just not comfortable with a more decrim context, churches, healing circles, that kind of thing. And absolutely, those should thrive and are important. And over time, could well become standard. I mean, hopefully, even mainstream denominational churches begin to incorporate medicine, and that's probably a generational shift. But hopefully, it won't take that long.
I think both of us have done some work in that regard. Let's hope.
Yeah, and I'm just really excited by the potential for churches and whatnot. But that the regulated access program is more replicating like what's coming out of Johns Hopkins and NYU, and most psychedelically naive Americans are not comfortable, without a well-structured, well-regulated access point. Where you've got accountability and professional training standards, and just the medicine, exactly the level of psilocybin and all that kind of stuff that our parents' generation is going to kind of need to feel comfortable accessing the healing power of these medicines. So we I think Colorado really sets the example and standard and bar for the rest of the country that bringing this regulated healing model in combination with decriminalization of the medicines, which is not just about community healing. It's just about doing whatever we want. We can go to a concert or wander around in nature or in our own home. There's this, that's the idea, to just have maximal freedom. Um, and yeah, and then there's some
Kevin
really good.
Matthews made the point that the police can't even take what you possess if it's below the right possession limits. Like they just have to leave you with it. They can't even take your substance if they catch you, which is
Well, you're
fascinating.
actually touching on one of the fraught lines.
Mm.
So um, initially, so the which is say like the experts in the state. So just kind of rewinding. After 301 in Denver passed, um, which the New Approach PAC was actually very helpful in doing, and actually contributed the majority of funding to the Denver effort, and raised, I think, 20,000, half from us. And Graham Boyd, who heads up the PAC, was making a case like, look, these guys got a real shot. They're running a good campaign. They could really, some targeted paid media could be helpful. And it was obviously crucial to the, razor thin margin of victory there. But of course, most of the credit goes to the activists that just charged this and made it happen. Kevin Matthews and Duffy and Travis and everybody that just came together and made magic happen. And just a huge, just wow. I didn't think it was going to pass personally. I thought it was kind of, it would lay some groundwork for a subsequent cycle, but just amazing that happened. And then, subsequent to that, various leaders in the movement, and we were financially supporting SPORE, as well as just knowing that Colorado was going to be ground zero in the 22 cycle. Already Kevin and team were chomping at the bit. They got in Rick Ritter, like this kind of the go-to for progressive statewide ballot measures. They brought him in and his whole network, and they were chomping at the bit to go in 2020. And thankfully, the decision was made to not go, just because it would have been, we would have done whatever we needed to do to win it. But there's just so many resources in the movement, and Oregon was already in motion, and we had 109 and we had 110, which was, both regulated access for psilocybin and decriminalizing all drugs in a treatment, not jail, Portugal approach. And, there was just a lot of obviously energy and attention there. But we just, obviously Colorado was chopping at a bit in 2020. It was going to absolutely go in 2022. So I think one of the major friction points here is that, New Approach and Rick Ritter and just everyone who's like an expert in, ballot measures was saying like, look, we can't just go in and decrim medicines, like just and allow like a funded opposition to attack us with like, oh, you can make 1 million Tootsie Rolls and psilocybin and give it out, and there's no, it's a total free for all. And basically they're saying like, look, we can either have undefined personal possession limits like Denver did. So Denver, when they decriminalized mushrooms for personal possession, and then say like what the limit is. It is said that personal possession, and basically that means like, you can have an amount of mushrooms that you can make a case for, and there haven't been any problems. It's just basically like cops are basically like, okay, it doesn't matter. It's like, you know, but and then but there's an argument that says, well, if you don't define it, then you could just have like a random cop and judge, just get in there and start making decisions. So that's the trade-off between like allowing people to make the case for with whatever they got, and that's one logic in one case, and then the other is like, well, let's just set super high thresholds, so then it's a bright line, and it's like just plenty of medicine, and do that. And so right off the bat, that was the big tension point with the activist base is like New Approach was proposing defined numerical limits / Rick Ritter and team, like just, they're like, let's just go with the sky high limits. I had already told him, I was like, look, man, this is going to be an anathema to the base. They don't want defined numerical limits. They want to just be able to make the case. Um, and so the limits were removed, and it was an intense process, with the Mike Coalition, but things had gotten like kind of intense, but I felt like a real job was made, and there was a real timeline also to file this measure. Um, and basically there was this other measure, this decrimination measure that a lot of the activists were really in favor of, that didn't just decrim the medicines, kind of like Oakland did in DC, and which is great in an urban environment that goes 90+% Democratic and is this highly progressive. You don't run the risk of getting like a Coloradans for children, which is the actual group out there that was crack-a-lacking and trying to get funded opposition. And we're able to intervene, the team's able to intervene with the usual funders on that side and just say, like, look, this is not this free for all like these guys are trying to say. It's just like personal, we're decriminalizing personal possession and a regulated therapy program. And this is about healing and wellness and personal growth. And basically we're able to head off a funded opposition, which would just be a disaster. I mean, it's real easy to get people to vote no, especially on an issue they're not familiar with. But these are the kind of strategic nuances that just get lost, and people just see like, oh, just an agenda to profit, and that there's some secret thing about whatever. But regardless, though, the process was, I mean, I felt like while it was compressed, it was really good, and my coalition leaders, including Danielle, who headed up the Criminalized Nature Colorado effort, were we were on calls together with New Approach, and everyone's making their critiques, and it was a wide open drafting process. And there's so much good stuff came in through that community input. And then the steering committee is has 4 people basically from that community, that my coalition. And I was hopeful that, hey, after the dust settles, people can come together, and there wasn't a chance in hell that the Decrim Nature ballot was going to qualify. But unfortunately, that people had to find that out for themselves, and it's just like you can't qualify these things on just grassroots. I mean, it's just freaking insanely difficult. But people just got their hearts and minds set on this, their preferred policy, and got all invested in it. And then when it didn't qualify, just all the feeling, the frustration, the anger, that's basically at the root of this. And then the critiques that are coming is like, this wasn't, this was like a whole capitalist takeover, the hijacking of the thing. And it's just, it's not accurate. It's like, it was very much informed by community and does protect community healing. And on the regulated access side, it is not, there's caps on the number of clinics that any one human individual can be, no matter how many shells or games they're trying to play. There's real caps and controls and mandatory BIPOC. Like there's all kinds of, incentives like sliding scale fees and just, XYZ. I mean, just like, it's really awesome. But none of that is obviously touted, it's just like, nope, it's just the worst thing ever. And yeah. And it's like, no, it's actually the best thing ever. It's just not the thing you wanted, and, but, yeah. And, I mean, I'm not saying the process was perfect, but I mean, it was like all the opportunity was there. And I think all this actual substantive input was inputted and considered. And if it didn't get adopted, there was a strategic political reason why it wasn't, such as like not just decriminalize professional possession. But that's a long-winded answer. Like there are not defined limits at the request of community. Like the community basically asked that we not define numerical limits. And there is that argument that like, look, just allow people to make their case with, whatever, maybe they got a 100-person church and, everybody there is super pros and takes 15 ounces, twice a week, let people make their case with what they got. And it's just a little bit hypocritical to kind of circle back around. Like after that was this whole big thing that actually got sorted out in favor of community to now attack, like as if that wasn't like, a thing, and it's just like kind of like this upside down critique. But, anyways, yeah, it's, I do want to respect just the passion and where everyone's heart is at. And, that everyone here is really wants to bring the healing power of these medicines and is understandably suspicious of corporate takeover like we're seeing in big pharma. And I mean, the way I see it, this regulated program and access is what competes with big pharma. This is what, Compass does not want to have happen. having all these clinics
Yeah, you
everywhere.
can grow mushrooms. Like,
Yeah, and you can grow
mushrooms
mushrooms.
compete with
Yeah,
synthetic all day long, and it's you've got to see that. Pharma
yeah,
groups, biotech can't even really play with whole fungi, right? So it's just a totally different category. Totally, it's a huge hedge against biotech and pharma generally, and not that pharma is inherently bad. There's some great things there, but we do want to protect a little bit, and I think this is it. I think you guys really nailed it. Um, what so I'm regularly confused and perplexed by advocates kind of throwing things at the wall, trying to make this look evil. Out of state money is something I hear regularly, but when we ask the right questions, this polls like it's going to pass like crazy. So like, I think the ground was, the soil was ready for this. So one thing that was really disheartening to me is just the regular false narratives being kind of created, and I perhaps the frustration is the reason why they're being created, but it just seems like there's really some sort of ethics lapse, and I don't understand what's going on there. But have you had a chance to like try to understand what's happening there?
yeah. I mean, obviously, observed it in its decriminalized nature. His leadership does it, and unfortunately, now Spore was kind of engaging in similar behavior. And it's like, it's like you feel that you've got like the truth, like like it's so like you've got the righteous truth, and it makes it okay to just completely malign and make up stuff about the other side that is you know just anything that goes serves to prove you right or win position or posture in the situation is fair game. I was like, all is
Like
fair in love
stakes
and
are so
war.
hay that ethics don't matter, kind of a
Yeah,
situation.
and it's just like, sure, it's just like paint a scenario. I mean, obviously with decrimination, I have this ridiculous one. With, we're somehow controlling indigenous conservation organizations in order to create scarcity and impunity to profit off synthetic mescaline. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, but that gets traction in certain quarters, especially in indigenous, uh, organizations and tribes where they don't know me. And like all of a sudden they're like, hear this semi plausible narrative of like, what the hell? So it's just like really, it does get traction. It is targeted. Like, it's not like just coming out of nowhere. These semi plausible narratives. And Spore's case, I mean, it's like, it's just kind of like this easy, like, oh, obviously this is a corporate takeover and profit over people. And we're going to just like paint this narrative, and it sounds good and semi plausible, just like, we've seen what happened to cannabis, obviously, but it's like, then you just look into the, the facts, and like the policy is clearly contradicts that. I mean, we've all learned from cannabis. We do not want to see what happened to cannabis happen on this regulated program. And we worked hard to make sure that that can't happen. Um, and yeah, and then like looking at the people involved. I mean, these are not corporations. There's not people out to make money or profit. I mean, these are people who have experienced the healing power of these medicines, like all of us, and dedicating our lives and resources to helping integrate these as fast as possible. And in Colorado, in two different healing modalities. And just because you're healing, you don't like the other one, doesn't make it like completely wrong or evil or you know so yeah, it's like the inability to see from another's shoes or whole complexity, or not even trying, basically, to just like just kind of paint a picture, ignore any inconvenient facts. um yeah, anyways. No.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, right? I'm a bit thankful that I've kept my distance from the Denver psychedelic scene. I'm also feeling a little negligent because I felt like I could have been kind of a cultural translator, at least, or mediator, to make it a little less severe. That said, the environment didn't look too friendly. So that's a big reason I didn't jump in. Um, and
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
it's pretty hot for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's me being a crybaby, but someday I'll be able to jump in the fire. um, and, I think this episode is my first step in that. Psychedelics Today does plan to publicly endorse this measure really soon. And I'm
Right
hosting a
on.
party in my town actually to help get more votes for it pretty soon and
No,
try to
that's
educate some
awesome.
folks.
And yeah, right on. And yeah, and just having, obviously third party validators of your stature and that kind of have that insight and window into movement dynamics, especially being there on the ground. I think it's going to help people who are like, what is going on?
Mm. Wait,
Yeah.
we're voting on legal psychedelics? Yeah, but wildly regulated frame and a decriminal. Yeah, should we keep putting people in jail? No. So,
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing, right? We're actually like, record sealing, which it's a weird term for me, but I guess that's, what you call getting rid of past convictions and,
mm,
and it's, it just provides that path for everybody. And yeah,
a really good friend of mine, if this passes, will not be going to jail. And that's a big deal for me. And
right on.
how many
Yeah.
people like are in prison for drug offenses that shouldn't be there? Like, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Um, I get caught up, David, on this like kind of intellectual debate because I'm not very involved with politics at all. I get trapped here because I want the Portugal style thing leading towards a regulated frame where we can buy anything that's safe,
Hmm. Yeah. That's the
and
end game. Yeah.
we had 9 people in 9 days die in my small town of 5,000 recently from a contaminated drug supply, probably fentanyl and ketamine. And I don't know what the hell's going on there. And the,
Yeah.
so I'm done. So it's like that's my end game, right? But it's like, how do we get there? I see this as a good step in the right direction. It's certainly not all I asked for. Kevin Matthews called me. I was like, I noticed LSD wasn't on there, Kevin, but I'll let it pass this time. But it's a hard debate, and the natural thing sells well, I think, to rural
Yeah.
populations, right?
No, it does. And, I was, just on that tip, I've been thinking about there's actually a way to make MDMA out of saffron oil from a grass that's actually ecologically can be farmed. And there's some people getting after that. And LSD, I've recently been given to understand can be derived out of ergot with, kind of in a semi-synthetic.
Yeah, ergotamine of rye with a couple steps. Yeah, like that's pretty
Yeah, but
interesting.
maybe nuanced language next time where it's still kind of in this natural frame, which obviously, we know voters love, right? I mean, that's where, you call it natural medicines. I mean, it's just incredible. But yeah, obviously to get allies like LSD and MDMA into the regulated program would be crucial. And yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and thank goodness we have a regulated frame coming down really soon with another organization you're a big part of, MAPS. So we're going to see MDMA hopefully being prescribed in less than 2 years. I don't know what the latest
Yeah.
numbers are.
And that's, in MAP for us, I mean, it's like obviously crucial to roll this out in a good way and make sure as many people who can benefit have access. But we also see this as a tactic to break the culture open to other models like the regulated state level program where you don't need a qualifying diagnosis and can access the medicine and then decriminalization as well. I mean, we're all, we're a bunch of libertarian, I'm kind of progressive lefty libertarian, but we're all about like being able to use the medicines as you want and end the drug war and create a safe supply of heroin and get the Ibogaine clinic co-located when people are ready, but let's not kill them in the meantime. And yeah, I mean, we got Carl Hart on the board. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely where, that we're very passionate, total, and that's the hope is that the PBC, the for-profit subsidiary, is going to be over time. It's going to take a few years, but once it's cash flow positive, ideally is going to be generating some real resource for that drug, broader drug policy reform work. Um, and yeah, and as a culture, it's a little bit of a tough moment right now. There's been a lot of blowback on 110 in Oregon, and like the homeless crisis is wrongly being laid at the feet of all drug decriminalization. the fentanyl crisis, which took a little longer to get there. And it was already there before, 110 passed, but of course it's being weaponized. So it's just like a tough. Colorado was being considered by Drug Policy Alliance and its state allies, and they made the call. It's just the political moment is just too difficult. But hopefully, in another 2 years, in 24, Colorado or another state, Washington was a similar story. The ACLU there was going to run, with allies, and it was a big in-state coalition. I'll just say ACLU, but it looked like they were going to run, and then they didn't. And now people are just making these hard kind of no-go calls, given the kind of political realities. But yeah, so it's like you get what you can when you can, and I think we're getting what we can in Colorado, and it's pretty awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
for what we can get.
Yeah, it's really substantial. So, one argument against that we have a really lovely counter for is like, we're not ready. The culture is not ready for this. I wholeheartedly disagree. We've been abused by the DEA for decades. It's time for that to be, slow down at least a little bit, if not go away entirely. And then, if your friend's dying from cancer, your wife's dying from cancer, how long can she wait?
Yeah, man, this is
It's
life-saving medicine, and in that case, like just your quality of life, you go from like being in dread in your last days to like enjoy. And yeah, the time is now, and yeah,
mm-hmm.
and I think it's gonna surprise people how much it's gonna win by. Obviously, knock on wood, but um, yeah, I think it's gonna like really be pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like the mushroom project. What number was that? 10, the Denver decrim mushroom situation.
301.
301. Thank you. That passed just by the skin of its teeth. And I think this one feels a lot more comfortable, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was all dependent on whether or not, and again, we don't know for sure, but per the last, mandatory reporting, the opposition hadn't raised any significant funding. And that's, and sometimes that opposition funding can just kind of wait and then just kind of spring like a last 2 week blitz. There are those kind of scenarios, and it's just a bunch of slow mo, black and white, kids getting high in the park, and, ambulances and shit like that. That, your average voter is like, whoa, and like, it doesn't know one way or the other, that would not be good. But so far, that has not, that opposition group has no funding. And I feel like the campaign team has been pretty effective talking to the funders on that side that could power up something like that to make the case. And that's part of the beauty of what we got on our side is we do have a bipartisan issue, like the veterans especially really cut across traditional partisan lines and can really talk to people on the conservative side in a way that few quote unquote progressive issues can. Um,
Right.
so yeah.
And I think we're seeing that a lot now politically. We have a lot of veterans coming out. Like they love the jujitsu culture. Jujitsu culture has lots of this psychedelic stuff happening for healing and performance gains. And, it's becoming wildly normalized, right? Like say what you will about Rogan, but he's changed that culture in terms of psychedelic and drug acceptance. Like that Carl Hart episode changed my life. Um,
Yeah, no, right on. Yeah, I actually didn't know about the jujitsu. Um,
yeah, it's fascinating, man. Apparently a lot of the gyms are kind of mono drug gyms. So, sometimes it's HGH, sometimes it's psilocybin, or ayahuasca or something. It's a fascinating thing. And it's like, definitely engaging a lot of the right and veterans. And it's awesome.
yeah, and yeah, obviously, like snow, like a lot of the action sports and people laying those first like ascents, climbing ascents were inspired by psychedelics and just the way you can just dial in and
Stories we
flow.
could tell there, but won't today.
Yeah,
Fascinating stuff in Yosemite Valley.
Oh yeah, right on.
Yeah, and Olympians, like there's so many top tier athletes and people using that, this isn't just a, healthcare situation. This is like we can do better, perform better all over the place. Not just do spreadsheets better for those who are worried about that kind of thing, but, love each other better, have more fun, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, man. And and that's the hope is that like, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, that these medicines can like, soften you and just make you less judgmental, and just more empathic. And, just ideally the policies that come out of a globally, psychedelically open and healed American and then global citizenry is going to be just better. Like, and we can grapple with these huge environmental and social problems. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the hope.
Mm-hmm. Now, is is there outside of Spore? Is there a major opposition party right now to the Colorado Prop 122?
No, I mean, well, there's the, I mean, it's funny if you go to like Ballotpedia and you look at the opposition statements, it's like spores and Colorado's to, Coloradans to protect our kids sounds kind of similar. Um, but yeah, so outside of those two, I think there's actually a, whatever the traditional cannabis, anti-cannabis one is registered their formal opposition, although I think they're kind of similar people with the other one. But yeah, so far they haven't gotten funded, so that's you know, I mean, in some
Hopeful.
ways, as difficult it may be to field some of the attacks coming out of Spore, and it's not the most pleasant, especially for community members who come from Spore and come from that world, and are just, this is really difficult for them personally. I mean, ultimately, the critiques are like, the measure didn't go far enough. We need to just have no limits whatsoever. That actually plays well with the, general electorate. It's just kind of like being for, oh, it's not a free for all. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not that worried about Spore's opposition as far as like the, viability of the measure, but just obviously it'd be great for everyone to come together at some point. I guess maybe post passage and kind of dust settles and feelings and, things, the sky hasn't doesn't fall as people are concerned about, and, advisory board gets seated, that's good, and, people are feeling good about that. And yeah, so hopefully, things can just kind of come together, and just a lot of the, yeah, passion right now, this get, it's just hot and difficult to
It's
navigate.
tough. It's tough. And
Yeah.
if I was under the gun like that, I'd start acting strange, I'm sure, especially after a few months of like kind of regular attacks. Um, I've had it from elsewhere, but certainly not from Spore yet. So, I'll say it out loud. Like I do and will, if this passes, have a professional interest in this, right? I've run psychedelics today. We do training. Like it's an obvious thing. That said, I'm more concerned about the drug war and people who are, going to be very desperate in their last days, or, haven't had help in, all these chronic conditions that we're going to start sorting out.
Yeah.
I have great
No.
compassion for that. My partner was disabled for 2 years with COVID recently, and with COVID, a bunch of other stuff. And, if it wasn't for psychedelics and a few other things, like she'd still be out. And
Yeah, man. No, it's, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's life saving medicine. It's just so helpful. It's remove. I mean, and that's it. It's not just for, the regulated clinic side. It's the healers in the decrim world, right? It's the legacy healers. They're going to all be able to breathe easier, come
yeah,
above
additional
ground.
protection, right?
I mean, they got protections, right? I mean, this is the thing. It's just like, dang, like, let's like have some kind of proportion in the critiques that are flowing, and there's just none. It's just like, like maybe, and that's, I was just talking to, the sport team, and just like, just, the constructive sandwich technique, like, say what's good, offer, your substance critique, and then say something good again. It's like, it's not like this pure evil thing, and it's not appropriate to make up a bunch of stuff. It's just like, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Right. And, in this community, to suggest that we're all going to agree on something, it's not, there's very few things we can agree on, right? Like my, our drug war end goal, like most of the psychedelic scene isn't there yet, I don't think. And,
yeah,
you know, some people, even active professionals in the psychedelic space, aren't yet convinced of the efficacy, which is a little crazy, but scientists have to maintain their rigor somehow, I guess. But it's, it's complicated and troubling to see that kind of stuff. And we've just got to face that there's other people with different views. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will, acknowledge that Spore and Duffy is, very at it. They do want to end the drug war and are very, how to say, racial justice motivated, and absolutely do share that view. And as does New Approach. I mean, Graham Boyd is, he's founder of the ACLU Drug War Project. He cut his teeth ending these like racist, out of control drug task forces in Texas, and and like was in there and ballot measure 110, and then the one that didn't go in Washington. I mean, it's just like what we all most care about. So does New Approach. I mean, it's like what they're doing, and yeah, and just like kind of giving a level of acknowledgement that that's their reason for existing, and it's not to make a bunch of corporations rich, and like that's not the game here. And we're all learning about
Dia
cannabis.
made a great point, David. There's a lot of ways to make more money than
Yeah,
this.
right. I mean, like, yeah, we could just open up mushroom sales and dispensaries. I mean, there's things that we could be doing that would, be a very obviously, transparent profit grab. Um, but yeah, there's not, and that's the thing. These clinics and training programs. I mean, you're in the business. It's not, it's not like this high margin, like highly profitable, like deal. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
like it,
I wish it was. It's
yeah.
good, but it's not great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's livelihoods.
totally.
Like the bio is like we want livelihoods to flourish. We want everybody to be able to make a good livelihood in this regulated system, but not let the big monopolistic takeovers happen. And then people can choose to have a thriving livelihood outside. I mean, it's just totally a market for that. A lot of people, ayahuasca is never ever. I mean, I just don't ever see that being, like that's not going to be touched. I mean, that's not a medicine that I feel should be in some kind of regulated program. And I think most people feel like that. And I think the medicine people really want to see after psilocybin, I mean, maybe DMT, I mean, just the molecule DMT and, in
There's
like
plenty we could do with
drug.
DMT, right?
What's
Plenty,
that?
plenty we could do with DMT.
Yeah, totally. Right. So yeah, I want to like nuance that, more carefully, like, taking, DMT and, putting that in a regulated program and, derived from natural sources, but not trying to like bring a ceremonial ayahuasca, inside some kind of like, oh, now the ayahuasqueros have to, we're gonna have a regulated program. I mean, that obviously is coming into the culture in a more spiritual, religious way, and should stay that way. And not that someone does want to go get trained, just to have a more fleshed out skill set or whatever. That's totally cool too. But that's where the church is, and that that's where we just really see the ayahuasca and the traditional plant medicine healing and ceremony like really thriving outside of the regulated program, forever, and people making their livelihoods in that way as well, and without any fear of legal jeopardy. I mean, it's just like a very that's the goal here.
Yeah, yeah. The so they'll be able to grow. They'll be able to do their work. Possession limits like exist a little bit, but it's not. I think they're
Yeah,
pretty friendly.
yeah, it's undefined. If I'm like a facilitator and I'm like, hey, I've got you know 20 people come to my ceremony, once a week, and got 5 months here, I mean, and everybody's using X amount. I mean, you can just basically, whatever you got, like just that's your story, and like, and the reality is people aren't getting rated. I mean, like it's just not even happening now, really. I mean, what this will allow is people to, I mean, not that, I mean, of course it is happening in some circumstances. But this will allow like people to just, like people are crafty and like just, this opens up a huge, you can drive a truck through it and just like, basically you can have a pretty big grow operation so long as you can justify like, here's all the people I'm supporting. And, ideally maybe organized as a church, and then you get that whole other level of protection. And, and the federal task force is formed, and there's, that's on the laundry list. I was just talking to some people involved with that, like, streamlining this whole, right now, ridiculous DEA religious exemption process, which is, a big joke. But supposedly that will be, at a federal level, that's going to get straightened out, and churches that get set up in the right way. And we've been supporting the Sacred Plant Alliance, which is a alliance of like really good entheogenic churches, and they're sharing best practices and opening for membership and helping optimize your legal posture vis-a-vis the Religious Restoration Act and potential DEA interference. And the DEA is not like arresting anybody, and they're seizing medicine at the border. I mean, that's the way they're playing the game. So it's already like no one's actually going to jail in these churches. It's just kind of like a seizure of medicine kind of thing, which obviously is terrible, and we need to stop that. But what Colorado's doing, I mean, that having a state like to say like it is okay to have a church under state doing growing medicine, at the same time that there's movement at the federal level. I think we're going to just really see a clear pathway for these churches to flourish.
Love that. And I think so. I think you're right. Like John Dennis and I, are you familiar with John Dennis at all?
No, I was, working hard with him to try to get the 109 program to open up, and, and that's, and insofar as it doesn't happen within 109, we're going to run another, ballot measure in Portland. And actually that gives us like real opportunity. And we're working with like Mason Marks and John Dennis and a lot of other rock stars there, and, Portland Psychedelic Society. And, and there, it's like, okay, you're forcing us to go to a ballot just because the city councils, unfortunately, things got all complex. But then, like, okay, well, let's tack on LSD and MDMA and, other allies, and, and create that space at the city level that you can have healing circles and churches and do all this stuff. And just decriminalize everything in a way. And then hopefully then set things up in Portland that then we can leverage state policy with. Yeah. But yeah, John Dennis, you were saying, I really
appreciate he and I did a series 2 years ago, maybe, Religious Liberties in America. We had Sean McAllister, Martha on, a number of other attorneys talking about their, how would you develop a church if you wanted to go up against the feds at a certain point and challenge it, a la UDV or Santo Daime. And it was a really great exploration. And I think it's really practical. But I'm glad to hear, this is the first I'm hearing, David, that there might be changes at the federal level. And I'm really hopeful about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, hopefully. I mean, that'd be awesome. Because, I mean, as much as, we can make awesome things happen, and, states like Colorado and California and Oregon, I mean, it's not going to happen like that. Wyoming or, over half the states don't have a ballot measure or, a remote chance in hell of a legislative process granting access to medicines. But if there could be, if we figure out a path for churches to, thrive under federal law, which, it's interesting. I don't know, you probably checked out that Rolling Stone article on the Mormon or ex-Mormon at some huge mega mushroom church.
I think I know these guys. I don't think I saw the article, but I know this group.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he was a former state legislator. He was alcoholic, really spinning out, and then mushrooms just, really, saved his life. And, got in contact with Source, and he's got this mega church with like 5,000 people, and it's like interesting because, the law that protects Mormon, I mean, there's like such sacred respect in Utah for the right of religion to do what it wants, and that the feds don't have a right to interfere. And it's interesting, like that you're leveraging like a very powerful conservative angle of argument for these churches, and that could really get surprising amount of traction in more conservative states. So so working at the top and paving a path. So then you got that, all 50 states can start healing and having access.
Right. And it's a good leverage point. It's a fantastic leverage point because it could cut theoretically across the political spectrum and be really sellable. I think there's a couple cases I remember John discussing with me around some really aggressive Religious Freedom Restoration Act moves that happened in the last year or two that would really be applicable for psychedelic stuff nationally and at the state level. So yeah, clarification, you need both federal, everybody gets it, but the state level, you also need a state level religious freedom type thing.
Yeah, and he might be referring to the Church of the Eagle and Condor. I think they're out of
There's a
Arizona.
chance, yeah.
Yeah, and they're in active litigation with DEA, and Sean's involved with that, and we've provided some support. And yeah, I mean, hopefully that could be another avenue. I mean, that where this, yeah, it kind of goes up to the Supremes, and kind of weird twist. The you know conservative leanings on this could play in our favor. I don't know. I mean, maybe not. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, but a crushing victory in Colorado, man, makes a lot of things possible. I mean, if we crush it with a 2/3 majority across the political spectrum, in an off-year election in a purple state, I mean, that's just going to send a shockwave through the political establishment and just make a lot of things easier. I think at both the state and federal level.
Yeah. Like if we go in a kind of more conservative states, I think Florida and Texas will immediately be quite envious.
Yeah, in Texas has got that whole very. I mean, obviously it's just a study bill, but passed virtually unanimously, and they're funding the psilocybin study bill with veterans, and former Governor Rick Perry is just this huge champion, and I guess his son's in the SEALs, and I'm on the advisory board of Vets Veterans Exploring Treatment
Oh, great. They're
Solutions.
lovely.
Yeah, Marcus and Amber are just awesome. Yeah, served with Marcus, and yeah, I mean, what a just powerful ally here to bring the medicines in. That they're able to like talk to, like uh, the most conservative politicians and then bring them around. And I mean, it's just like especially in this political moment of so much division. I mean, our issues just got it's incredible this right left coalition we got going on.
Right. Yeah. And, Marcus Capone there, his story, I think, is, I don't know why it hits me different than somebody like Jesse Gould from Heroic Hearts, but it does for some reason. I'm like, yeah, you probably lost a ton of friends. You did your damnedest to do your job, and the government can't take care of you at the end of the day. It's forcing you to leave the country to get the treatment you need. And I'm like, that's
Yeah, no, it's like yeah, ridiculous. And I'll just say equally empathize with Jesse and Heroic Hearts.
oh
And
yeah, I
yeah,
love Heroic Hearts plenty too.
yeah, yeah. I got it. I mean, Marcus
Yeah,
is a sexy beast for sure. But so is
yeah,
Jesse. Jesse just ran an ultra marathon, and I mean
did
both
well,
those
sure,
guys, both Vets and Heroic Hearts, man. That's like the one-two punch veterans of war.
absolutely.
Yeah, they're just like such powerful advocates, and yeah, their stories are hugely compelling, and the reason people are going to get the medicines much sooner than later, just because they are like cutting through what is a gridlock nationally otherwise to the partisan divide, and it's anything that gets into that one way or the other, is just kind of lost. And
We've got to
yeah,
value these things that allow us to talk to people who we think are our enemies. And, what are those? Paul Stamets identified bees as being like the number one bipartisan issue. Great, great angle. And
what
then,
was that?
bees. So
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, right
honeybees.
on puppies, bees. Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah. And then, how do we, do the same thing with psychedelics? It's the veteran, conversation. And, um, very difficult to argue. The psychiatrists try their hardest here, but like the cards they were dealt and the drugs they weren't able to research for many decades, now they're back on the table finally, and we can really start helping a lot more people with
Yeah,
non-traditional psychiatric
absolutely,
meds.
man. And that's the thing is like that. The regulated access model has the constituency of the veterans and of end of life advocates, and not like in either case there aren't veterans or people who are dying who are willing to risk uh, taking medicine in the underground, and obviously that's what Vets and Neurocarts are doing. And but that's it's just like such a stigma that they're fighting against this uphill battle with so many veterans and so many people are dying who just are like, no, I'm not going to fly to Mexico or do some weird underground thing. Like it's got to come above ground, and that's a constituency, and it's not just the people who want to decriminalize medicine in Denver. I mean, it's like That there's like other, Colorado's a big state, and there's other stakeholder groups, and just to respect, and then, they have legitimate interests and reasons for preferring a regulated access model.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the regulated thing is important. I think you made a point. Mushrooms have been decriminalized for a while in Denver. Not everybody's healed yet. We've got to have this regulated frame to pull in people who are really sick and not able to access these underground spaces. Um, Even if it's decriminalized, that's not enough for most people, in
Yeah,
my
I mean,
opinion.
it's not. I mean, I made the point, like, decriminal, you don't have mushroom therapy in the hospices. You don't have, the in Denver and Oakland, we're not laying the groundwork for ibogaine clinics. Like that's, it's just like there's real advantages and pros to the decrim model, and it absolutely needs to happen and allow the churches and the community healing, and it is more economically accessible and allow people to grow their own. And there's a laundry list of reasons for decrim and healing in a decrim context. But the limitations is like when you talk about the broad swath of Americans, like that's not comfortable, and they want, they needed like what's coming out of Hopkins, like that kind of model, and accountability and professionalization and standards on the medicine, and just all that. And then that also enables insurers and Medicaid and Medicare, as we show cost effective intervention in that professionalized delivery of care model, we can start to get private insurance and public insurance to cover. And, so that's, there's those pros and cons to either. And both together are really complementary. And yeah, and it's just really about recognizing that. And, hopefully more people can come to embrace that. No.
Agreed. Yeah. Um, was the decrim nature bill inclusive of peyote?
Yeah. So, initially I was pretty, I was like upset because I'd been assured that that was not going to be the case. And, but they did not call out peyote specifically. But it turns out that their logic actually does make sense. And it's that Colorado already prohibits peyote from being used except for bona fide religious purposes. So it already is pretty restricted. And our measure, or the NMHA, does not exempt peyote per express wishes of indigenous leadership. Um, yeah, personally speaking, I 100%, I think we need to give huge deference to the Native American and indigenous leadership generally, and that includes the National Congress of American Indians, like basically the highest representative body, have like come in and said, like, do not decriminalize peyote outside of indigenous led efforts, and allow the our indigenous led conservation effort to proceed. And I think that full stop, like, you know native sovereignty, this is our medicine, like, let's just respect, and then with what Colorado's doing, um, yeah, I would say, like, the rationale that why the Native American leadership has the position they do is that while cultivation is a strategy, and it is a long term strategy, is that the plant or the cactus takes 10 years to mature. So if you decriminalize for quote unquote cultivation, but you still allow use, which is what decrim nature generally does. It just doesn't like to say you can only grow it and you're not allowed to pull from the wild gardens. It's just like, while you're growing it for 10 years, the only source of peyote is the wild gardens. So that's where the Native American church is like, dude, just don't touch it until we got this under control. And, there is no, growing peyote, it's going to take you 10 years to grow it. And then in the meantime, you're just pulling off these gardens, which is, that's what is the problem. So it's a totally reasonable position. Even the Colorado religious exemption, I would guess the indigenous leadership aren't happy that, because obviously, technically speaking, 2 million Coloradan adults could claim a religious exemption and use peyote. It's not, I think, that hard to leverage. Um, The fact is, though, I think most people, like, if they're interested in medicine, that's, and that's the other thing. I mean, if you really, really are called to peyote, I mean, you can. I mean, there are Native American church chapters in Colorado that, I mean, there's a spectrum. There's definitely chapters where they're, very indigenous only, but others are more open to non-natives sitting in ceremony and praying. And it's basically up to the road man and that call. And like people really feel called to the medicine. I mean, there are access points and yeah. And then there's this other mescaline containing cacti. So I just feel like that one, it's just like, really about respecting indigenous sovereignty and leadership. And until the gardens are in a good spot, like they have a real legitimate concern. Like if the psychedelic renaissance just opens things up in a huge way and we decriminalize everything, it's not just peyote. I mean, toad's the same way. Decrimination is the same way on that. They just have no accounting for like, look, like 5-MeO from toad, that is not a sustainable source at all. Like right now, it's just like a disaster. And like, that's something that you should be using the synthetic. I mean, and there are actually plant sources of 5-MeO I've been learning, but which is good because that will qualify for Colorado's program. But I mean, I think it's just like we need to start calling it out, and and I don't think actually NMHA actually didn't either. I mean, it's something we should have done, but just specifying like, hey, if something's like really not a good source, just carve that out, and say 5-MeO from non-toad, natural 5-MeO from non-toad. Not that that's what NMHA did, but actually on review, that would have been good. And, just like really taking and a real counting that, decrim nature, it doesn't mean you get to rape nature, understand what is a sustainable source of medicine, what's not,
Mm-hmm.
like this whole cognitive liberty, religious liberty is like, you need to balance that against ecological sustainability and indigenous rights, basically, and not just say like I have the right to use anything. It doesn't matter how endangered it is or unsustainable that is. No.
It's a big deal, and that's a solid point. Um, I've been on this train for a while, and it's lost me a lot of friends in the movement. But I'm kind of okay with it. Um, I think I've been most loud about the toad issue,
Mm.
and of course, that's highly political territory. And
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying like a legitimate like Yaqui practitioner who are the stewards of the land where the toad is. I mean, and are in a like, righteous relationship and are doing that. I think there are legitimate, you know, just like with peyote. I mean, I think there are legitimate entry points for like a really dedicated seeker, but you should go down to Yaqui land and like and not just like be, you know, with whatever
right.
shaman and Northern California and just smoking toad.
And understand that these traditions, even in Mexico, the tribes are somewhat new. It doesn't make them invalid at all, but they are
No, no, no.
newer
That's a good point.
situations.
The Seri and the Yaqui, I mean, is not that long indigenous thing. But what's interesting? So I'm involved with the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund, IMC Fund, and we're raising money. It's an indigenous-led decision-making body, and we're raising funds for these indigenous-led conservation projects. And one of them is the Yaqui to restore wildlife habitat and water for the toad population there. But then another project there is actually they've gotten permission from the Mexican government to have multi-medicine, multi-ceremony in Yaqui territory, where and
Whoa.
there's a study where like they've got the Huni Quinn coming in with ayahuasca, like they're doing peyote ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony, toad ceremony, they're just bringing in and it's this whole protocol for indigenous people struggling with like meth and just seeing like how does this protocol work, and then there's like a 6 month follow up, and like basically like it's going to be a published study, and if this works as well as it looks like it's working, then this could be a model for all indigenous lands. I mean, certainly Mexico first, but then everywhere, like just being able to do ceremony with all medicines and make that available to the indigenous population would be
Mm.
pretty righteous.
I have a friend, former student as well, working in New Mexico, and she really wants to make some sort of legalization bill somewhat like Colorado's, but be First Nations first. How can we give them the most favored nation status in these bills, and really, help get them resources, help them help themselves more, and just a fascinating lens. And I love that coming from Mexico too. What a great way to kind of leverage energy, kind of pull a judo move to empower First Nations more.
Yeah, right. I mean, if they had the right to, well, and they will under Colorado, actually, that's exactly. I mean, not just them. I mean, everybody. But um, I mean, the ceremonies with all kinds of medicine can flourish, and um, that's a that's a goal here. And there is a mandatory Indigenous representative on the advisory board, and there's an annual the program needs to annually report on impacts to Indigenous cultures. Um, yeah, I think I mean there's always I mean and to the good ideas. I mean I think we're always iterating. Like okay, like we didn't get that good idea in this time. Well, there's next time. And it's just like not like saying oh every single thing I'm thinking up now should have already been. It's like yeah okay that's actually a good idea, but let's we'll get that in the next one. I mean how much better is Colorado than Oregon? And sure the next state's going to be better than Colorado.
Right. This is only the second time, everybody.
Yeah.
It's a pretty spectacular bill for it only being done once before, and only with one substance and only a regulated frame. This is pretty spectacular in my opinion.
Yeah. No, it's groundbreaking, and California's primed to go. I mean, it was like super disappointing to have that our 519 legislation get torpedoed in committee, and
what happened there? Did a committee review it and just gut the bill?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy, like what committee, what they're empowered to do, and yeah, they basically just eviscerated 519 and just turned it into a study bill. But so Wiener killed it because that would just, basically be a waste of time and prevent, substantive legislation from passing. So he's reintroducing 519 next year, and we can guess at the political dynamics, and it's an election year, and it's a controversial thing and whatever. But again, like with Colorado winning in a huge way, I think that like really opens the legislative path in California and other states, and we can get 519 through. But I mean that just kind of goes to show like this. There's just this narrative like, oh, there's like this cabal that can just wave a magic wand and make shit happen, and it's like, no, dude. I mean, like, like like back when 519 was trapped in, I forgot what, the health committee in the House, and they were saying like, look, we're going to do hostile amendments and put in what we think are good limits if you don't do it first, and basically give us opportunity, but then decrimination is like flipping out like, oh, we're going to educate them to that we don't need limits. And it's like, dude, it's just like, that is not, it's just completely, not reality. This is like there's no chance. I mean, their own lobbyist was telling them that is not an option. It's like either we come up with our own limits or they're going to impose them. And like in parking this bill, which we ended up doing, didn't still didn't it still didn't survive. I mean these things, the legislative process is like so many different ways you can fail. And when you're legislative champion like Wiener, who's the best, and he's the guy who's doing the safe injection sites and everything else, and he's like telling, and he's reporting like, look, this is the deal, he's our ace, like we're gonna trust him, like he's got the inside view, like, hey, look here, dude, this is like the reality that we're confronting if this bill is gonna move. And even he obviously doesn't have some magic wand, and so anyways, though, I mean, we're really optimistic that with Colorado winning, that's going to really pave the path for 519 or whatever new, bill number it'll be next year. Yeah,
you're great at remembering those numbers. I'm going to have to like have flashcards.
Well, I live in California, and
that helps.
We're just caring about that one most of all.
Yeah, it was a real bummer when that got shot down. I was also really hopeful. We'll. This is a long fight, everybody. Like, this is not over anytime soon, unfortunately. But we just got to keep at it. The recent cannabis decision from Biden as an indicator that there are some things softening. It's not perfect, but it's softening.
Yeah, man. I mean, maybe that, I know it's like, yeah, it's like so minimal on one level, but on the symbolic level, yeah, it's just like, you know,
Right. The architect of the modern drug war now started to kind of apologize, and that's a big deal. And I
yeah.
wonder,
Oh, go for it.
I wonder what would happen if Hunter Biden was able to tell his story more publicly and more regularly, right? And would that change the narrative there? Or, it's probably not in the family's best interest, so maybe they won't do it. But that story is so powerful, recovering from ferocious substance abuse issues, and 5-MeO and ibogaine being kind of a
Yeah,
major
man.
thing.
Yeah, right on, dude. And that's what we're setting in motion in Colorado. And that's not like a thing that, you need regulated. I mean, it's like no joke. I mean, it's a, medicine that does have some real cardiac contraindications, and you can't be just having fly by night,
I'm
you
told, by
know.
the way, some new protocols that are out there for ibogaine administration make it like near zero risk, which is extraordinary.
Oh, are you
Um,
following the Spanish study?
um, I was in a conversation with an underground person working in Florida, and they were talking about just really low dose over a long time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So ICERS is this wonderful
iSeries is
organization
running that one.
in Spain, yeah, and
Great.
we're coordinating. It's at whatever
Mm-hmm.
university, Barcelona or something, and but that's exactly the protocol. They're taking methadone. People who've been on methadone, maintenance for 30 years and just huge amounts, low quality of life, and methadone is just such a joke. I mean, you're basically substituting an even more addictive drug than heroin. This why don't you just give people heroin? Like what's the
Yes.
point? Now it's even harder to quit, and but yeah, that's the protocol. They basically take this 6 weeks, once a week. They do the step, low dose, and then they're stepping up the ibogaine as they're stepping down the methadone, and yeah, just getting some incredible results. And I think half the study participants are fully abstinent. The other half have like just really lowered their methadone, and
The way we
huge.
treat these people is unconscionable, and it's nonstop. And we've got to figure that out. I don't know the way forward other than good storytelling like this. Um,
Yeah, no, man, totally. And that's yeah. And then just I want to share. So our director of social action is Adam Eidinger out in DC, and he was campaign manager for legalizing weed there, and was really helpful in the Decriminalization campaign. So he's been working, and this is I'm going to give the credit to SSDP in the last prisoner project, CV D'Angelo's nonprofit, and they've been organizing a protest at the White House, and so like in some ways, there's suspicion like, oh, Biden, they got wind of, this, but they're not calling it off, to the point of like, that Biden's, it's symbolically great, but it didn't actually really release anybody. I mean, most people in federal prison are not in there for possession; they're in there for greater quantities, but much lower than your average dispensary. And basically, we're not doing anything that's not legal in DC and elsewhere in the country. And so they're still going to follow through on the protest and say like, we want 100 cannabis prisoners freed out of federal prison and keep the heat on. And so yeah, so
good,
shout out
good.
to Last Prisoner Project and SSDP for keeping the feet to the fire.
Yeah, we've got to do that. So support all those organizations if you can, folks. Yeah, this is a really important struggle here, and it's not just about any one thing. This is a really complex ball of wax we're all working with, right? It's everything from healing people to allowing people to gain their lives again, or gain, all of a sudden I'm not in chronic pain, or, like all that work in Palo Alto, Menlo Park. What if we have, monstrous innovations in energy capture, carbon capture, all this fun stuff in a few years with psychedelic innovation centers or something. So we have a lot of power here at our fingertips. And how do we play this? Carefully, quickly. I think quickly, carefully, close second.
Yeah, and just yeah, and then when you got these policies that are moving on a timeline, and you know, like in Colorado, and but at the end of the day, like wow, the substantive, you know, kind of policy really was shaped by community as much as, national partners. I mean, it was really like, I mean, that whole decriminate, that side of the equation is very much, to the credit of community leaders, like really, and to the drafters who were very much listening. And, if the, anything that didn't cross like a strategic, political viability issue, that basically made it in, and like that was, yeah. So I think, yeah, we just kind of keep going, collaborating as we can, knowing sometimes things are going to flame out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And we keep learning.
yeah,
That's it.
100%.
All right. Well, anything, last words or anything like that you want to throw out? Websites, organizations, or folks you want to shout out?
Yeah, I highlighted the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund. There's actually a more kind of citizen facing sister effort called growmedicine.com. So if you've really benefited in plant medicine and want to give back, that's a really cool way of, and it's partnered with the IMC Fund that has this Indigenous decision making process, and it's a way of reciprocating in a good way. Um, yeah, just yeah, it's, said, obviously my perspective and truth there on Colorado, but just any of my friends listening there on the, who don't feel the same way, just look forward to getting through this election, the dust settling, and then just, making things happen on the community healing side and the churches and the circles and all the good stuff. And I want to shout out actually Brooklyn Psychedelic Society and Colin over there, who's got the Journey Cohort program. It's basically starting with holotropic breath work and think ketamine, but it's basically this community healing, very accessible program that he wants to roll out or see rolled out into other societies. And Portland, could really get some traction in Colorado, but Colorado could be a real seat of innovation in on that community, because it's pretty unregulated, and but just getting responsible screening protocols, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
we really like SPA, like the Sacred Plant Alliance, like they really thought through their screening, their escalation. It's like a self-regulating church, but you got real issues you got to think through, and what are people are contraindicated, and maybe you should go to some one-on-one healing first before they sit in circle, these kind of things. And
Yeah.
yeah, but anyways, yeah, no, thank you, Joe. um, really excited to see Colorado just bust through in a mega way and pave the path for California and everywhere else.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, David. And let's sit tight for a minute while this file uploads.